Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. If you're a business consultant who specializes in managing crises, there's no better client to have than the Canadian vaping industry, which in just the past few years has been pummeled by the so-called epidemic of teen vaping, the so-called vaping-related lung illness, and of course, the coronavirus. Whether it's COVID lockdowns, flavor bans, or nicotine caps, the industry is under withering assault, but yet it perseveres. However, 2021 could be the most challenging year yet. Joining us today on RegWatch to talk about those challenges is Robin Gasnier, District Manager of Vape Nation, an Ontario-based vaping products retail chain. Robin, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
2021 poses an existential crisis for the vaping industry as Health Canada is considering a nationwide nicotine cap, and now this is a big one, a nationwide flavor ban. Robin, what do you make of that?
A 20 milligram nicotine cap is definitely one thing, but a flavor ban is a whole other problem.
And why is that?
A 20 milligram nicotine cap is survivable. There's ways around that we as retailers can find and choose to use. However, a flavor ban would essentially eradicate any vape retailer that essentially would specialize in vape.
So look, we're going to dive into these big regulatory moves in a moment, but first, Ontario has just come out from under a COVID lockdown just this week. Tell us, how has COVID affected your stores and vaping overall in the province of Ontario?
In the last lockdown, we saw a pretty major dip in sales. A lot of that was probably linked directly to people kind of not being ready for this. And so we definitely saw some major drops, I think something around 30 to 40%, which was pretty shocking at the time. This time around, this last lockdown that has just finally finished here was a little different. I think a lot of people were used to it. They kind of already knew what we as retailers were going to be offering for them to still be able to get buy the need, which was very welcoming. Right? It was nice to see that even through lockdowns, we could keep business afloat and keep people happy.
Now, during lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, was there a difference in terms of losing customers from vaping back to smoking?
I think yes, absolutely, because there was so much uncertainty at the time that so many people kind of almost assumed that we might have closed and that they wouldn't be able to get their vaping equipment. So I do think that in that first lockdown, with us not being deemed an essential service, that really got to people's head, and I would assume, probably lost a lot of customers.
How much of a psychological hit then was it not getting the essential service status?
It's something that I think I can speak for all retailers. We were waiting for that, right? Like, I don't think we were expecting to be considered essential. On a personal level, I was not shocked at all. I was kind of waiting for that. I don't think there was much shock, for sure.
But yet, though, famously in Canada, cannabis is legal, and of course, alcohol is legal. Were they deemed as essential service?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
Hypocrisy knows no bounds sometimes.
Yeah. I think that would be the best way to put it.
So, do you think there was a balance struck then with regard to COVID and how it was handled in terms of the economy and the employment and so forth?
I think everything that the Canadian government has done so far is about balance, between keeping people employed and keeping the case numbers down as much as possible. It's a tough balance. I look back at Australia, and they did something like 4 months of lockdown and achieved great success at getting rid of the virus, but they lost something like 1 million jobs, like permanent. Where here, at our worst, I think there was something like 2 million jobs that were temporarily lost. It's all about balance for sure.
So in your opinion and professional experience, I guess, best to say, what did more damage, COVID or the so-called vaping-related lung illness, aka EVALI?
EVALI, no doubt.
How was that?
The Valley was obviously so much more centered around vaping, and the fear mongering that came along with that. It was just directed at any person who had ever touched an e-cigarette before, and I got to people's heads. Just before coming on the show here, I kind of look back to see like the difference between our first lockdown drop and then our the Valley fiasco and the drop that we saw in there. And it was massive. It was just a massive drop that we didn't recuperate from until months later, with I hope proper education on our part. It's definitely got to people's heads a lot more. And again, I get it. At the time, the media was very, very much on top of pointing to the vaping industry as the culprit.
So you blame Valley on the media?
It's a combination of the, we'll say, studies that they were doing and the evidence, again, in quotation marks, that they were pushing out at the time.
Are you skeptical then of evidence-based decision making going on with regards to vaping?
Oh, absolutely. The evidence, even down to how they studied e-cigarettes, like, if you really do your research on this, they almost tamper just enough with how they're studying these things to make sure that the results are going to be what they want.
So what was it essentially about the so-called vaping-related lung illness scare? What was it about the scare, do you think, that hurt business so badly?
It flipped everything on the head, right? The whole narrative went from vaping is, most likely, almost definitely, which I would say definitely personally, user standpoint, better for you than smoking, to all of a sudden, hey, take 10 puffs off this e-cigarette and you're going to die.
So for the people who left vaping over Valley, did they return to smoking?
I would say a good 90% of them, right? That's kind of what I was saying. Like, I'm hoping that, for whomever did end up at the time decide that this is just too dangerous for them, that they just maybe quit cold turkey, didn't go back to smoking traditional analog cigarettes and all of that. But I would assume that, as a nicotine addict myself, I can tell you that, I'd probably be thinking the same if I wasn't fully involved in the industry.
What I'm trying to get at here is a sense of whether or not were these, new vapors that, were a bit squishy in terms of their understanding about vaping, or do you think some longtime vapors may actually got the scare over Valley and returned?
It's 100% all the new ones. The seasoned veterans of vaping, they've been around for long enough to know that the health risks, as far as we see, are very minimal. And again, from that personal use of the product, right? Like it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. And all you had to do again was a quick Google search to kind of understand, how quickly these cases were forming, how they were all centered into the U.S. It's not like it was a worldwide epidemic. Again, I love my quotation marks. The seasoned vapors knew better. But it was definitely the people, especially the people who are kind of just there. They don't care to know how the product works. They're just smoking. Those people definitely ones that talked about that.
So Valley came right after the so-called epidemic of teen vaping, which was hysterical too as well. And the industry is still suffering from that. And let me just point out to everyone that, yes, there was definitely an increase in youth use of vaping products. But what the government is not, and the media is certainly not showing or heralding, is that over the course of the last year, there's been a significant drop in Canada, but yet still, the industry is facing now a potential nationwide flavor ban, and definitely it looks like there'll be a nicotine cap.
Yeah, well, from without being able to confirm it, it does sound like the 20 milligram nicotine cap. It really is too bad that they're not looking at the evidence here and seeing that there's been a drop in these underage cases of people vaping, right? And I mean, from a certain standpoint of view, the nicotine cap is, I wouldn't say it makes sense because there's so much wrong with it. But from their point of view, from an uneducated point of view, I can understand what they're trying to accomplish here. But yeah, I mean, the damage that it'll cause is that definitely outweighs the good on.
When Health Canada put out Gazette 1 here regarding the nicotine cap and set out sort of the guidelines and the rationale for it, one of the things that they brought up was that nearly 23,000 postcards from people who vape were opposed to additional measures and reported either quitting smoking with vaping or attempting to quit smoking with vaping. But the key thing here is that it seems that vapors themselves in this postcard campaign that happened back in 2019 reported that 0, 3, and 6 milligrams per milliliter were the most popular, and that kind of provided some ammunition for Health Canada to look at going, well, the 50 milligrams is way too high, and to bring it down. The vaping industry themselves, vapors themselves, have told us that they don't need that much nicotine. Based on your sales, and obviously you're in Ontario, you've got a number of stores, is not the higher nicotine more popular?
Yes, absolutely. Here's my guess as to what kind of probably happened there. First of all, nicotine salts was not as big on the market at the time. I think it was pretty much in its baby stage, at least for us in Canada. So a lot of people weren't even, quite evolving into that. And there was absolutely a time when, like 3, 6s, and even 0s were more popular than anything higher. But that the answer to that was just that anything higher in freebase nicotine is totally not palatable. So I think the timing has a lot to do with that. The other thing I would say probably has a lot to do with that is the people who would have involved themselves in this at the time would have most likely been people who have been part of the industry for quite some time, where anybody else who might have been at the time, again, starting kind of to use nicotine salts was most likely a new user. So they probably just didn't have that, heart to even bother and try to involve themselves in it as much.
So why is it then, Robin, are the nicotine salts in a higher nic, why are they more appealing to a first-time vapor, to somebody just coming off of smoking?
Salt nicotine at a higher concentration is definitely more successful for people. I also think that, again, like if you look at the math, the science of things, I don't think it's 100% accurate, but I think there's something around like the average cigarette has like 8 milligrams of nicotine per cigarette. I don't quote me on that. I think it's anywhere from probably 5 to 15 or something, depending on the brand. But yeah, I think the average cigarette's about 8 milligrams of nicotine. And if you were looking back at how people vaped back in the day with a 3 or a 6, how many puffs they were going through, and kind of calculating how much nicotine intake, like I did it on a daily sort of thing. How much nicotine intake they were taking in daily, it was a major drop, like a major drop of nicotine intake. You're not going from, if you were just looking at cigarettes, for example, you're not going from like a pack a day to 20 cigarettes a day now. Like going from smoking to vaping at the time was like going from a pack a day to 5 cigarettes a day, and you were puffing on this thing just as much as before. And so it's clear that with a 3 or a 6 or a 12, you're just not achieving the same level of nicotine that you are with one single thing at all. Where with the salt nicotine, you're definitely getting closer. And here's where it gets even more interesting: is that even at the highest concentration with salt nicotine, you're still getting less nicotine than you would have as a pack-based smoker per puff, right? If you were to calculate it per puff. One of the things that I wish they would definitely do is exactly that: really study the amount of per puff in nicotine intake that you would be getting from smoking versus vaping, and vaping at different strengths, different devices, things like that. They should definitely be looking at it because the science is so inconclusive overall. I mean, heat has a lot to do with the activation of nicotine, right? Like it's I think the higher the heat up to probably a certain point, the more the nicotine is activated. Again, I'm no scientist, but I do know that heat will have some effect on that. And so with cigarettes right away, I mean, they're obviously cooking. They're going much, much, much higher in heat. And I would assume that probably also has a lot to do with how much nicotine intake the business.
We've heard often from some in the industry, they've alluded to the fact that there are technological innovations or other ways in which you can set up your kit to get a higher dosage of nicotine out of the 20 milligrams per milliliter. In our pre-interview, you mentioned to me actually what that solution is, what specifically it is that you can do. And for those vapors out there that might be fearing this nicotine cap, what is it that they can do?
The solution is very simple. If most of what these people at a 50 are using, which I would assume, because again, when I sell it to my customers, they're generally using something like a Caliburn, or they're using a STLTH, a pod device, and those are very low wattage devices. They're getting out, like I said, 5 to 15 watts. And at a 50 milligram, that's super palatable. It's super doable. Now, if I were to put a 50 milligram e-juice in a 40 watt device, however, at 40 watts, that would be probably a whole lot less palatable. It'd be very harsh. It'd be pretty hard to vape. There is actually some people who do need to do that. Some of the heaviest smokers out there do vape like that. I'd say I don't recommend it, but if that's the only thing that's going to work for you, they do that. So anyways, if you were to take a 20 milligram and vape it at 40 or 50 or 60 watts, you're going to see that the nicotine intake, again, per puff, is going to be probably relatively similar to that 50 milligram puff you were getting, but on your small Caliburn or Juul that's vaping at 10 watts.
So you said, Robin, that the industry can survive this nicotine cap, but it would not be able to survive a flavor ban. Why is that?
Well, I mean, a flavor ban is pretty simple in terms of the damage it's going to cause. What makes us retailers, I think, saying the industry as a whole is probably not the right way to say this. It's really the frontline retailers like ourselves at Vape Nation that would survive. Vaping is here to stay. I think the evidence is there for that. Even tobacco or mint options are there and sell very well. So I don't think that the industry would completely fold. But the independent retailers that we have in Canada here, I don't see many of them, if any of them, surviving. We have that advantage of being retailers that we can carry a lot of these products. We're getting tons of people who are coming directly to us because when they walk into our stores, they're seeing 300 flavors. So it gives them a ton of options, and especially at the beginning, having those options is crucial. It's just crucial to find the right flavor and all that kind of stuff. So it's at the end of the day, what would really happen is that because you would be taking the flavors away from the industry, there would really be no need for a vape shop experience anymore, because what'll happen is you're left with tobacco, mint, or flavorless options, which, I mean, none of them differ from each other all that much, right? Like most mints, if you like mints, you're probably going to like this mint, this mint, this mint, that mint, whatever. You'll probably like most of those mints. There's going to be very little of them that you're going to dislike. Same thing goes for tobacco. And I mean, flavorless, obviously it's flavorless. You can't take that one out. Where fruits differ is where, there's so many of them. There's so many different flavors. There's so many different sort of palates out there who are going to experience those flavors. And for a lot of people, I think it's like 30 to 50% of people, that's even more. That's the only way they're getting off. They don't want the tobacco. They don't like mint. They want fruity flavors. That's what they're looking for. And the idea there, for myself even, is pretty simple. It's not even about the fact that they think they'll enjoy it more that way. It's about the fact that if they're on tobacco only, they're going to end up thinking that it's just too much like a cigarette and not having a cigarette. And so they find that just kind of veering the opposite direction and taking fruit flavors is going to be better for them. But essentially, going back to what the question originally was, what's going to happen is it doesn't allow us to be any different than your convenience store. And that's why, so you'll just lose the need for these retailers, right? Where you might not lose the need is the different devices and all that. Like, your regular Joe at the convenience store is still not going to be educated enough to be able to teach you how to do life properly. But my fear is that if you take the flavors away, you're actually also kind of taking those devices away a little bit too. You start to kind of not need special devices that might be better with flavor, that might, show accents of certain flavors better than others. And tobacco and mint flavors are just so plain Jane that it loses a lot of its appeal for sure. It's more than half of our customers are using fruit flavors, dessert flavors, mint and fruit flavors. Absolutely. The industry would survive, but it would be reduced to convenience stores slowly but surely.
So obviously the customers are the ones that are going to be affected the most. Retailers, you're serving the customers. So are you able to get the customers to activate to help, speak to Health Canada, get their point across, or are they an immovable force?
So just like any cause, it's pretty difficult to get people to speak up about this. There's very few people who are going to do it without incentive, which is too bad, really, for sure. We've done a great job, I think, at Vape Nation to try and educate people on some of the issues that are coming up and to try and get them involved. We've tried all sorts of different things. First was just kind of a scripted speech I had my staff say to each customer at checkout, and just to try and get them involved, get them seeing that this is a real issue and this will affect their personal life. And so you should take a stand here. But oftentimes that just didn't work out. So we've gone as far as offering discounts for just signing a postcard to get people involved. It hasn't been easy, for sure. And again, if there's anything that I would say here, it's that people involve yourself, because we make the difference, for sure. We've seen it. We've seen the result of when people speak up. It really does have a profound effect on the government's decision here. It's not an easy thing. It's doable. Unfortunately, it does often come with a little incentive for the customer to really get themselves involved.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, if you had an opportunity to sit down with Health Canada, and this is the last question, what would your message be?
If I had an opportunity to sit down with Health Canada, what would my message be? Oh, boy. The message would be pretty clear and simple. Do your research. There's plenty of professionals who have studied, let's just even look at just smoking by itself. They don't even include vaping. And they know this is like the worst thing. This is terrible. The tobacco is just terrible. I've even heard it like this from health professionals before that. The notion that anything could be worse for you than smoking cigarettes is crazy. It's just downright bananas. And so the fact that you are presented an option that is very clearly, because again, the chances of it being worse or equally bad for you are next to none. Why are you, just stalling the progress that we're making here? Do your research. Help us do more research. Help us even maybe find ways to increase the health benefits of this product, making it better, making it healthier, finding what's wrong with it and maybe working around with it. That's the kind of stuff I would like to see Health Canada do, is stand by our side rather than fight with us. Help us see the mistakes that we're making, because like any industry, we're making our own mistakes, and help us correct them rather than make uneducated decisions that will eventually lead to a pretty major downfall for this industry.